Do you have what it takes to be a gladiator? A day in the life of a Roman arena legend. Stop for a second. Look around you. What was the last thing you saw that made you feel a real adrenaline rush? What pushed you out of your comfort zone and made you think, I would do that? Now imagine yourself in the center of a gigantic arena under the unforgiving Roman sun. The roar of tens of thousands of voices is deafening. The smell of sweat, metal, and blood mixed with the arena's dust hangs in the air. In front of you, a massive opponent, a giant of muscle and bronze, armed to the teeth. In your hands, the fate of your own life and, perhaps, your freedom. Would you be able to face this? Would you be able to live day after day, knowing that every single dawn could be your last? If your mind is already buzzing with the idea, if your heart is already beating faster, then get ready. Because we are going to unravel not just the glorious combats, but the brutal daily life, the hopes and the fears of the men who became the biggest stars and, ironically, the most expendable among the audience of the Roman Empire, the gladiators. And in the end, if you enjoy this time travel, if this story captivates you, don't forget to leave your like, subscribe to the channel, and share it with your friends who also love history. It's not yet day, and the cold of the Roman dawn insists on clinging to the stone walls of the ludus, the gladiators' training school. Inside, the gloom is cut by small oil lamps, revealing Spartan cells that look more like cages. To modern eyes, it would be hell, but for these men, it was the harsh reality. The majority were slaves, condemned criminals, or prisoners of war, forced to fight by state order. But make no mistake, there were also free men, the octorati, seduced by the promise of fortune, fame, or simply trying to escape from unpayable debts, trading freedom for a gladiator's contract. They subjected themselves to a terrible oath, the Sacramentum Gladiatorium, pledging to be burned, bound, whipped, and killed by the sword, if necessary. The first sound is not an alarm clock, but the thunderous voice of the lanista, the school owner, or a doctor, the weapons master, breaking the silence. On your feet, the sun doesn't wait for anyone, much less death. There's no time for laziness or lamentations. The day begins even before the rooster crows. The first meal was Spartan, but strategically thought out. Barley porridge, perhaps hard bread, and some dried vegetables. The famous barley diet, which was rich in complex carbohydrates, provided the vital energy that would be spent. They needed strong, resilient bodies, not full, sluggish stomachs. This diet, in fact, led some to be nicknamed hordearii, the barley eaters, in a pun on the cereal that formed the basis of their diet. For us, it may seem monotonous and bland, but for them, it was the fuel for survival, the basis of their strength. As soon as the food was down, the bustling of the ludus transformed into the sounds of metal, shouts of instruction, and the muffled sound of blows. The central courtyard, or the covered training area, was already buzzing with activity. Under the unforgiving gaze of the lanista and his doctors, who were often retired gladiators, the training began. Don't think it was just learning to hit. Far from it. A gladiator's training was a complex science, developed to create combat machines capable of precise and deadly movements. Each type of gladiator, or armatura, had its specific style and armament. The murmiglio, with his large rectangular shield, scutum, and straight sword, gladius, trained to be a moving wall. The retiarius, agile and light, practiced throwing his net, rete, and the precise handling of the trident, fucina, always avoiding direct confrontation and relying on speed to exhaust the opponent. The thraex, with his small curved dagger, psycha, and square shield, was a specialist in fast and deceptive attacks. The secutor, the pursuer, with his smooth, heavy helmet that covered his entire head except for two small eye holes, was the hunter of the retiarius, adapted so as not to get entangled in the net. The training was intense. They didn't fight with sharp weapons among themselves on a daily basis to avoid financial losses, but rather against solid wooden posts, palus, using wooden or blunt weapons that were purposely heavier than the real ones. Why double the weight? So that in the arena, the real weapons would feel light and fast as feathers. They ran, jumped, lifted rudimentary weights, and practiced the same blow, the same defense, the same maneuver hundreds of times. The repetition was exhausting, painful, but it was what forged precision and endurance. transforming them from mere men into warriors with trained reflexes and fluid movements. The discipline was absolute. Life in the school was closer to Spartan military life than to a gym. Minor injuries were constant: calluses, blisters, small cuts. There was a doctor in the ludus, often another slave with some knowledge of herbs, and dressings, so that the warriors could be fit for the next day's training. Pain was a constant companion, and resilience was not a virtue, but a condition for survival. In the middle of the day, there was a brief and much-needed break. The hours under the Roman sun and the physical exertion left their bodies sweaty and covered in dust. Hygiene was simple but vital to prevent infections. In small pools or with buckets of water, they cleaned themselves using strigils, metal or bone scrapers, to remove sweat, dirt, and oil from their bodies. There were no soaps like today, but scented oils were sometimes used by the most successful gladiators or their tutors. This was also the time to treat the major injuries from training. A sprained ankle, a deeper cut, everything was cared for, with bandages and plasters so it wouldn't get infected and take the gladiator out of commission. The body was the work tool, the lanista's capital, and it had to be in working condition at all times. The lunch meal was similar to breakfast, but perhaps a little more abundant, always focused on cereals, legumes, and vegetables. Meat was a rare luxury, usually reserved for famous gladiators or for feast days. The goal was to replenish energy for another round of training or for other tasks in the ludus. The afternoon brought more training, or, for those who were preparing for an imminent combat, a period of strategic rest and mental preparation. But a gladiator's life was not just muscles and technique. It was a constant psychological battle, a game of emotional chess. They lived under a virtual death sentence, facing the possibility of a brutal and public death in every fight. Imagine the weight of that. Every night, upon lying down, the uncertainty about tomorrow. This pressure, paradoxically, created deep bonds of brotherhood among the gladiators. They were companions in destiny, united by rigorous discipline and the constant threat. They shared fears, hopes, and solidarity became a pillar of support. Many became more of a family to each other than any relative they might have left behind. Some famous gladiators, the true superstars of their time, achieved a near-legendary status. They could have better cells, more varied food, and even the company of admirers who saw them as tragic heroes. Their victories were celebrated, and their lives, although still in slavery, were less difficult than most. The ultimate prize, the dream of every gladiator, was freedom, the ludus, a wooden sword given to the victorious gladiator who ended his career and became a free man. But few, very few, reached that point. The oath of death haunted them, but the possibility of becoming a legend, of being revered by the Roman people, was a powerful motivator. The evening brought an end to formal training. The last meal of the day, again simple, was followed by a somber silence that fell over the ludus. Some gladiators might spend time on rudimentary gambling, telling stories, or caring for their equipment, but for many, it was a moment of silent reflection, of facing their own demons and mentally preparing for the day that would come, a day that could lead them to glory or death. As the moonlight began to bathe the ludus, the gladiators retreated to their cells. Sleep was a necessary refuge, but often restless, populated by dreams of combat and the shadow of the future. There was no escaping the reality. Every day lived was a day closer to a new fight. A gladiator's life was a paradoxical existence, at once brutal and glamorous, enslaved and heroic. They were despised for their status, but idolized for their courage and skill in the arena. Men who, even without choosing their destiny, embraced it with a ferocity that echoes through the millennia. They remind us that life and death were closer than we imagine, and that human resilience, even in extreme circumstances, can be the greatest weapon of all. So, do you still think you have what it takes to be a gladiator? This journey was just a glimpse into a typical day in the lives of these warriors. The history of Rome is full of dramas and feats like this, and with each chapter, we encounter lessons that shape the world we live in today. The gladiators were not just fighters. They were symbols of strength, sacrifice, and the pursuit of glory, even if it came at an extremely high cost. Their lives, although short, continue to fascinate us and make us question what it truly means to fight for something. If you enjoyed this epic journey into the past and want to uncover more secrets of history, don't hesitate. Leave your like down below to show your support, subscribe to the channel so you don't miss any of our next videos, and share this content with your friends. History is an incredible journey, and with your support, we can explore every corner of time together. What other historical character would you like to see a day in the life of? Leave your suggestion in the comments. Your support is what motivates us to continue bringing you incredible and detailed stories.